There are species that age so slowly or so differently that they challenge our definition of what normal aging even is. In the frozen Arctic, sharks cruise through centuries. In the ocean, a tiny jellyfish can rewind its own life cycle, slipping back into youth like it found a reset switch. These aren't myths. They can still die, of course, by predators, disease, and accidents, but not necessarily from the internal clock we call old age. They are living experiments running in plain sight, and their tricks are forcing scientists to ask a dangerous question. If nature can stall aging, then what exactly is aging made of? In this video, we're going to untangle that question. To understand their secrets, we first have to understand the problem they've already solved. Why do bodies break down in the first place? For most complex life on Earth, including us, the body is like a high-performance machine that begins to break down over time. This process of decay is called senescence. It's not a disease you catch. It's a built-in feature of our biology. But why does it happen? To understand how other animals cheat aging, we first have to identify the 4 specific killers operating inside your cells right now. The exhaust, the countdown, the garbage, and the confusion. Our metabolism, the process that converts food into energy, is powerful, but messy. Think of it like a metabolic fire. It keeps the lights on and the engine running, but it also produces a constant stream of chemical exhaust inside our cells. These byproducts are called free radicals, highly reactive molecules that bump into important cellular parts and damage them. This is oxidative stress, basically wear and tear at the microscopic level. Free radicals can nick our DNA, warp proteins, and punch holes in the delicate membranes that keep cells stable. One hit doesn't matter much, but over a lifetime, the damage accumulates, like a machine that looks fine from the outside, while its parts slowly corrode from within. But there's a second clock ticking inside us, and this one feels almost programmed. At the tips of our chromosomes are protective caps called telomeres. Imagine them like the plastic tips on a shoelace, the aglets that stop the lace from fraying and unraveling. Every time a cell divides to grow new tissue or repair damage, those telomeres get a tiny bit shorter. It's a built-in countdown. After a certain number of divisions, often described as the Hayflick limit, the telomeres become too short to protect the genetic code properly. At that point, the cell either stops dividing and enters a kind of retirement mode called cellular senescence, or it dies. Either way, fewer healthy cell divisions means slower repair, weaker tissue maintenance, and a body that gradually loses its ability to bounce back. As this is happening, our internal housekeeping systems begin to fail too. Cells have a cleanup and recycling process called autophagy, basically the body's microscopic waste management. In youth, it's efficient. Damaged parts get broken down, recycled, replaced. But with age, that recycling program slows. Damaged proteins and worn-out cell components start to pile up, like clutter in a workshop. This is tied to something called proteostasis, protein quality control. When proteostasis breaks down, the cell becomes less reliable, more error-prone, and more fragile. The machine doesn't just wear down, it starts running dirty. And finally, there's a deeper layer, not just damage to the parts, but confusion in the control system. The epigenome is a layer of chemical tags that tells your DNA which genes to turn on and off. It's what makes a skin cell behave like a skin cell and a brain cell behave like a brain cell, even though they share the same DNA. If DNA is the hardware, the epigenome is the software settings. As we age, those tags can get scrambled, a process called epigenetic drift. It's like a conductor slowly losing the musical score. The orchestra is still there, but the cues come at the wrong time. Genes that should be quiet turn on. Genes that should be active go quiet. The system becomes noisy. Our bodies do have proofreading and repair systems, incredibly sophisticated ones, but they aren't perfect. Over time, the errors pile up. It's the biological equivalent of making a photocopy of a photocopy over and over again. Eventually, the image degrades until the information is hard to read. This is the default setting for life. But some creatures have found ways to slow the damage, protect the countdown, clean the clutter, and keep the instructions readable. In other words, they've found ways to bend the rules. Our first solution to the problem of death takes us to a remote volcanic archipelago, a living laboratory for evolution. When Charles Darwin visited the Galapagos in 1835, he wrote about the giant tortoises as antediluvian animals, creatures from a world before the flood. He was more right than he knew, because these giants are masters of what I call the fortress strategy. Galapagos tortoises can live for well over a century, and some have reached astonishing ages in captivity. And what makes them truly strange isn't just how long they live, it's how lightly they seem to age. In many turtles and tortoises, the classic aging curve barely shows up, what scientists call slow or negligible senescence. In simple terms, the risk of falling apart doesn't climb the way it does for us. For decades, we thought the tortoise's secret was almost boring. They're cold-blooded. They move slowly. They run a slow metabolic fire. A slower fire means less smoke, less of that cellular exhaust we talked about earlier. And yes, that's part of the story, but it's only half, because the tortoise isn't just living slow. It's living protected. Look at the obvious, the shell. It's a near-perfect defense. In the wild, most animals don't get the privilege of dying from old age. They get eaten. But the tortoise, wrapped in armor, survives long enough for evolution to invest in something rare and expensive, long-term maintenance. And when we finally looked inside that maintenance system, we found something incredible. In a major genome study that included Lonesome George, the famous last tortoise of his kind, scientists found signals of unusual biological investment in longevity, changes in pathways linked to DNA repair, immune function, and cancer-related processes, which matters because long life comes with a terrifying math problem, a problem called Peto's paradox. Here's the intuition. The bigger you are, the more cells you have. The longer you live, the more chances those cells have to mutate. So in theory, large, long-lived animals should have cancer rates that skyrocket, but they don't. Elephants solve it with brute genetic backup. They carry around many extra copies of a major tumor suppressor gene called TP53. The tortoise seems to solve it differently, not with bulk, but with zero tolerance. In lab experiments comparing turtles and tortoises, Galapagos giant tortoise cells were found to be rapid in triggering apoptosis, a self-destruct mechanism under certain kinds of cellular stress. It's as if their biology is wired to pull the plug early, before a damaged cell can become a dangerous one. They don't try to fix the bad apple, they throw it out immediately to save the barrel. So the Galapagos tortoise doesn't conquer death by outrunning danger. It conquers death by playing defense. Live a quiet life, build a thick shell, and be ruthlessly efficient at deleting your own mistakes. And that's the fortress strategy. But next, we're leaving defense behind for something even stranger. A creature that doesn't just resist aging, it seems to reverse it. From the warm islands, we now drop into a world of absolute cold and darkness. Deep beneath the Arctic ice, something ancient drifts through the water so slowly it almost doesn't look alive at all, like a shadow with a heartbeat. This is the Greenland shark, the longest living vertebrate we know of. For centuries, nobody could prove its age. These sharks don't have hard bones you can read like tree rings, so their lifespan was mostly guesswork until 2016, when researchers used a clever solution: radiocarbon, dating the proteins in the lens of the shark's eye. Those proteins form before birth and barely change, turning the eye into a sealed biological time capsule. When the results came back, they were almost absurd. The oldest shark they tested was estimated to be around 392 years old, with an upper range that could stretch to 512 years, which means this animal may have been born when Galileo and Shakespeare were still within living memory, and it has been gliding through silent water ever since. Her secret is an extreme version of the tortoise's strategy. While the tortoise relies on defense, the Greenland shark relies on the deep freeze. It lives in water just above freezing, and cold doesn't just feel harsh, it rewrites biology. The Greenland shark grows at a ridiculous pace, less than a centimeter a year, and it may not reach sexual maturity until around 150 years old. It doesn't chase life at full speed, it drifts through it. Before we meet the ultimate rule breaker, we have to look at three creatures that push persistence to the absolute limit. Think of this as the lightning round of longevity. First, we investigate the lobster. You've probably heard they are biologically immortal. That's not quite true, but the reality is cooler. Most animals get weaker as they age. Lobsters do the opposite. Because of an enzyme called telomerase, their cells can constantly repair their DNA caps. This means a 140-year-old lobster is actually stronger and more fertile than a young one. So why don't they live forever? Ironically, they don't die of old age, they die of exhaustion. Molting, shedding that hard shell, takes massive energy. Eventually, the lobster gets so huge that the act of molting becomes too difficult. They simply run out of fuel to escape their own body. They don't decay, they just get too big to survive. Next, we look at the ocean quahog. If the lobster is the active approach, this clam is the passive one. In 2006, scientists found a clam off the coast of Iceland named Ming. By counting the rings on its shell, they realized Ming was 507 years old. It was born in 1499, just after Columbus sailed. It lived through the entire rise and fall of the British Empire, sitting quietly on the ocean floor. Its secret isn't repair, it's extreme stability. Its proteins are so sturdy, they can sit in salt water for 5 centuries without rusting. Finally, we go deep, to the Antarctic glass sponge. These aren't just animals, they are immortal cities. While the individual cells might die, the colony structure remains, building layer upon layer of a glass-like skeleton. Scientists estimate these colonies can live for 15,000 years. They were alive during the last ice age, when woolly mammoths were still walking the earth. They are so permanent that tiny shrimp often swim inside their glass lattice, get trapped, and live their entire lives inside the sponge, a prison of love inside a creature that basically refuses to die. But here is the catch: the shark, the tortoise, the clam, and the sponge. They all share one flaw. They are just stalling. They are holding off death for as long as possible. But there is one creature that doesn't just pause the clock, it resets it. We have seen strategies to slow down death, to defend against it, and to outlive it. But what if you could do something even more impossible? What if you could die, and then choose to be born again, in the same body? Meet Turritopsis dohrnii, the immortal jellyfish. This tiny creature, no bigger than a pinky nail, has achieved what humanity has only dreamed of. It has a biological reset button. Normally, biology is a one-way street. You are born, you age, you die. A jellyfish starts as a polyp, grows into an adult, reproduces, and eventually withers away. End of story, but not this one. When the immortal jellyfish faces starvation, physical injury, or old age, it doesn't die. Instead, it breaks the laws of physics. It collapses into a blob, sinks to the sea floor, and its cells begin to reverse their entire development. This process is called transdifferentiation. It's the holy grail of regenerative medicine. In this state, a muscle cell can decide to become a nerve cell. A skin cell can transform into an egg. The jellyfish literally reprograms itself, turning from an old adult back into a baby polyp. Think of it like a butterfly that instead of dying, decides to wrap itself back up in a cocoon, turn back into a caterpillar, and start life all over again. And here is the kicker. It can do this theoretically forever. The discovery itself was a total accident. In the 1980s, a German student named Christian Sommer was studying jellyfish in the Italian Riviera. He collected specimens in petri dishes and, honestly, just forgot about them. When he checked the dishes days later, he expected to find dead jellyfish. Instead, the bodies were gone, and in their place were tiny, newborn polyps. He hadn't found a dead animal. He had found an animal that had simply refused to end. It is the only known creature on Earth that is truly, biologically immortal. So, we return to us. For centuries, the Greenland shark, the Galapagos tortoise, and the immortal jellyfish were just biological curiosities. But today, they are becoming blueprints. Nature has shown us that the rules of aging can be broken. Now, scientists are trying to figure out how to break them for humans. Remember the shark's deep freeze? We can't live in freezing water, but we can mimic its slow metabolism. This is the science behind caloric restriction and intermittent fasting. Studies show that when you reduce calories without malnutrition, you force your cells into a survival mode, turning down the metabolic fire just enough to reduce the smoke damage, exactly like the shark. The tortoise survives by ruthlessly deleting damaged cells. Humans are now building a drug to do the same thing. It's called senolytics. Remember those zombie cells that stop dividing but refuse to die? They float around, causing inflammation and aging. Senolytic drugs are designed to act like the tortoise's immune system. They hunt down these zombies and flush them out, potentially reversing the feeling of frailty. But the most radical approach mirrors the jellyfish. Scientists are now experimenting with partial reprogramming. Using a specific chemical cocktail, known as the Yamanaka factors, they can now take an old cell and reboot its epigenetic markers. This isn't science fiction. In lab studies, this method has already restored vision in blind, elderly mice. They didn't just repair the eye, they made the cells young again. Of course, we are not mice, and we are certainly not jellyfish. The path to turning these discoveries into safe human medicine is long, dangerous, and full of ethical landmines. Reactivating telomeres, like the lobster, can accidentally trigger cancer. Rebooting cells, like the jellyfish, is incredibly complex, but the paradigm has shifted. We used to think aging was a one-way street, a fundamental law of the universe, like gravity. The animals have proven that it's not. Aging is just a biological program. And if it's a program, it can be rewritten. The secrets we've untangled from these creatures are no longer just in nature documentaries. They are in labs at Harvard, Stanford, and UCSF. Scientists, inspired by the principles these animals perfected over millions of years, are beginning to prove that human aging is not an inevitability, but a program that can be rewritten. But the discovery of these immortal beings leaves us with a profound philosophical question. We are a species defined by our mortality. Our art, our culture, and our religions are all shaped by the knowledge that our time is finite. If we were to one day conquer death, or even just dramatically extend our healthy lifespans, would we still be human? What would a world of immortals look like? And who would get to be one? Would it create a new, unbridgeable gap between the rich, who can afford rejuvenation, and the poor, who cannot? Perhaps the quest for longevity isn't just about adding more years to our life, but about adding more life to our years. The secrets to doing so are out there, hidden in the darkest corners of our world. The real question is not whether we can find them, but what we will do with them if we do. Share your thoughts in the comments below. To untangle more of these incredible stories that shape our world, subscribe to World Untangled and join us for our next deep dive.